Something is burning across Russia right now, and it is not stopping. Refineries in Samara, a terminal on the Black Sea coast, oil tanks in Leningrad Oblast, a pipeline station in Krasnodar, storage facilities in Crimea, fires that take 150 firefighters days to extinguish, and then get hit again before the smoke has cleared. This is not a series of isolated incidents. This is a deliberate, coordinated, and rapidly escalating campaign that Ukraine has been quietly building for over 2 years. And in April 2026, it has reached a scale that Russia simply does not know how to answer. Welcome to Ukraine's industrial firestorm, a campaign that Russia cannot put out, because every time it douses one fire, 3 more start somewhere else. Here is what is different about what is happening right now compared to anything Ukraine has done before. The scale is new, the depth inside Russia is new, the simultaneity is new, and the weapons making all of it possible represent an evolution in Ukrainian strike capability that military analysts are still scrambling to fully document. Ukraine is no longer running sporadic strikes on Russian energy targets. It is running a systematic destruction campaign across Russia's entire oil value chain, from upstream production platforms and pipeline pumping stations all the way through refining facilities and export terminals, hitting every link in the chain at the same time. Let the numbers speak before anything else, because they are extraordinary. In March 2026 alone, Ukraine's Commander-in-Chief Oleksandr Syrsky confirmed that Ukrainian forces struck 76 Russian industrial targets in a single month using long-range weapons. 76 in 30 days. That is more than 2 verified strikes on Russian industrial and energy infrastructure every single day for an entire month. 15 of those 76 targets were oil refineries. 5 were strategic defense plants. 14 were fuel and lubricant storage facilities that directly support Russian armored operations at the front. 12 were S-300 and S-400 surface-to-air missile systems. The March campaign was not just an energy campaign. It was a coordinated assault on every layer of Russia's ability to sustain and project military power simultaneously. Then April arrived, and the campaign did not slow down. It accelerated. On April 16th, Ukrainian drones struck the Tuapse oil refinery on Russia's Black Sea coast, one of the 10 largest refineries in Russia, owned by Rosneft, processing 12 million metric tons of crude oil annually. The strike ignited a fire so large that Russian opposition media compared it to a volcano erupting on the coastline. More than 150 firefighters and nearly 50 pieces of emergency equipment were deployed. The fire burned for 3 full days. On April 20th, less than 24 hours after the last flames were finally extinguished, Ukrainian drones hit Tuapse again. A second fire erupted in the storage tank area. By April 22nd, Russian telegram channels were reporting that roads near the refinery had begun to pool with oil products, leaking from ruptured storage infrastructure. One Russian channel described it with dark sarcasm. "It's raining oil in Tuapse," the port that handles up to 10% of Russia's total petroleum product exports had effectively stopped functioning. At the same time, Ukraine was hitting Tuapse. It was hitting the other end of the country simultaneously. On the night of April 18th, a massive wave of Ukrainian drones struck the Novokuybyshevsk and Syzran oil refineries in Russia's Samara region, nearly 1,000 kilometers from Tuapse, deep in the Russian heartland. Both refineries are Rosneft facilities. The Novokuybyshevsk plant processes over 8.8 million tons of crude per year. The Syzran refinery processes between 7 and 8.9 million tons. Both were hit in the same overnight operation. Satellite imagery showed thick black smoke rising from Novokuybyshevsk's LOU AVT-6 refining unit. By April 18th, the Novokuybyshevsk refinery had halted primary oil processing entirely. Industry sources later told Reuters that both facilities had suspended operations. Russia's airport emergency protocols, the so-called Kovir, or carpet mode, were activated at airports across Saratov, Penza, Samara, and Ulyanovsk simultaneously as the drones swept through the region. That same overnight operation also hit the Baltic. Ukrainian drones attacked the port of Vysotsk in Russia's Leningrad region, triggering a fire at an oil terminal on Russia's northwestern coast. Strikes also hit the Tikhoretsk oil terminal in Krasnodar and an oil depot in occupied Sevastopol in Crimea. In a single overnight campaign on April 18th, Ukraine simultaneously struck oil infrastructure in the Black Sea south, the Russian heartland, 1,000 kilometers inland, and the Baltic north. The Russian Defense Ministry claimed its air defenses intercepted 258 Ukrainian drones that night. The fires burning across 4 separate Russian regions suggest that claim was at best incomplete. On the night of April 21st, the Security Service of Ukraine's Alpha Special Operations Center struck the Samara Linear Production Dispatch, stationed in the settlement of Prosvet, a critical piece of infrastructure that blends high sulfur and low sulfur crude from different Russian oil fields to produce the export-grade Urals blend. According to Ukrainian intelligence sources, the attack damaged 5 storage tanks, each with a capacity of 20,000 cubic meters, all filled with crude oil. That specific facility does not just process oil for export. It is the hub that allows Russia to create the standardized Urals crude blend that its international buyers, primarily China and India, purchase and have contracted for. Disrupting it does not just create a fire. It creates a supply consistency problem that ripples through Russia's entire export relationship with its remaining oil customers. The strategic logic behind all of this is not complicated, but it is worth stating clearly because it is sometimes lost in the dramatic visuals of burning refineries. Russia's state budget relies on oil and gas revenue for at least 1/3 of its total income. That percentage has become even more important now that Western sanctions have restricted Russia's access to foreign financial systems and cut off a range of other revenue streams. When oil prices are high, as they have been throughout the Iran war period in 2026, Russia benefits directly and significantly. Higher global oil prices mean more dollars per barrel of crude that Russia sells, which means more money flowing into the Russian federal budget, which directly funds the military campaign in Ukraine. Ukraine's answer to that dynamic is to hit Russia's ability to produce, refine, and export that oil. At the same time, global prices are giving Russia a windfall. You cannot spend oil revenue that you cannot generate. The campaign is also designed to attack Russian military logistics from a direction that the front line cannot cover. Russia's armored forces, artillery systems, and mechanized infantry all run on fuel. Diesel for tanks and armored personnel carriers, aviation fuel for aircraft and helicopters, motor fuel for logistics vehicles. The storage facilities Ukraine has been systematically destroying are not just commercial oil infrastructure. Many of them are the fuel depots and lubricant storage facilities that directly support Russian military operations. The 14 fuel and lubricant storage facilities hit in March alone were identified by Ukraine's defense ministry as sites that support the rapid refueling of Russian tanks and armored personnel carriers immediately before their deployment to combat positions. When those facilities burn, the armored columns waiting for fuel wait longer, or don't get fuel at all. The weapons making this campaign possible represent another story in themselves. Ukraine's FP-1 drone, manufactured by the Ukrainian Firepoint company, can carry up to 120 kilograms of explosives and fly approximately 1,500 kilometers, enough range to reach virtually any target in western Russia from Ukrainian territory. That range envelope is what changed the strategic picture. When Ukraine's strikes were limited to approximately 500 kilometers from the border, Russia could keep its most valuable energy infrastructure safely out of reach by placing it further inside its territory. The 1,500-kilometer strike radius eliminated the buffer entirely. Targets in Samara, targets in Leningrad Oblast, targets in the Krasnodar interior, all of them now sit within Ukraine's operational reach. Russia has no geographic safe zone large enough to protect its energy infrastructure from a drone that can fly that far, and Ukraine is preparing to extend the campaign further. The Baker Institute's Energy Research Division noted that Ukraine is moving toward integrating heavier missiles, including the FP-5 Flamingo, the Long Neptune, and indigenous ballistic systems, into its energy strike operations. Heavier weapons mean larger payloads, more structural damage per strike, and a sharply reduced ability for Russia to conduct patchwork repairs within weeks. As Ukraine incorporates these systems, Russia's reconstitution potential will erode faster than it can rebuild, and export volumes would fall not temporarily, but structurally. Russia's response has been a combination of military countermeasures and political threats, neither of which has proven effective. On the military side, Russia deployed additional air defense systems around industrial sites and claimed high interception numbers, 112 drones one night, 258 on another, yet the fires keep starting, the refineries keep going offline, the export terminals keep suspending operations. Russia's air defense network, already degraded by Ukraine's parallel campaign against defensive systems along the front line, cannot simultaneously protect every square kilometer of energy infrastructure stretched across a territory the size of a continent. On the political side, Russia issued a direct warning to European countries on April 15th, after Ukraine signed new agreements with European defense companies to expand its drone production capacity. The Russian Defense Ministry called European support for Ukrainian drone manufacturing a deliberate step leading to sharp escalation, and warned of unpredictable consequences. The statement named specific European cities, London, Munich, Prague, Riga, as well as production sites in Spain and Italy, accusing them of becoming part of Ukraine's strategic rear. It was a threat with no clear follow-through option. Russia cannot strike those cities without triggering NATO's collective defense clause. It cannot stop European companies from producing drone components through military means, and it cannot extinguish the fires burning across its own refinery network through diplomatic anger directed at Brussels. The scale of the economic damage being inflicted is becoming measurable even through the fog of wartime information. Ukraine's strikes on Russian Baltic infrastructure in March, primarily the Ust-Luga and Primorsk terminals, caused losses, estimated at nearly $1 billion in lost export revenue within a single week. That figure covers only the direct revenue loss, not the cost of repair, the cost of deploying emergency services, or the secondary economic effects of supply disruption. The 40% of Russia's oil export capacity that analysts assessed as halted following strikes on its three major western export ports, Novokuybyshevsk, Primorsk, and Ust-Luga, represents a structural hit to the revenue stream that funds everything from soldier salaries to missile production. Russia's state budget was already running a deficit. Losing significant oil export capacity while simultaneously spending at wartime rates is not a sustainable combination. The fires burning across Russia right now are doing something more than destroying physical infrastructure. They are demonstrating to Russia, to its remaining international partners, and to the global financial markets that watch oil export flows, that the revenue Russia was counting on from elevated oil prices is not arriving intact. China and India, Russia's two largest remaining oil customers, are receiving disrupted supply, inconsistent Urals blend quality from damaged pipeline stations, and uncertainty about delivery schedules from export terminals that keep going offline. Every disrupted shipment is a commercial conversation about reliability that Russia cannot afford to have. Its strategic position in the global oil market depends on being a dependable supplier, even under sanctions. Ukraine's campaign is systematically attacking that dependability. This is the firestorm that Russia cannot put out, not because Ukraine has unlimited drones or because Russian firefighters are incapable. The 150 emergency personnel deployed at Tuapse were doing their jobs. It is because the strategic architecture of the campaign is designed to overwhelm any response Russia can mount within its political and military constraints. You cannot negotiate your way out of fires that restart before the smoke clears. You cannot build air defenses fast enough to cover every refinery, every terminal, every pipeline station across a country that spans 11 time zones. And you cannot make the revenue appear that is no longer being generated by the facilities that used to generate it. Russia entered this war believing it could outlast Ukraine economically, that its energy wealth would fund an indefinite military campaign while Ukraine's economy buckled under the strain. Ukraine has spent 4 years methodically, patiently, and now at an accelerating pace, building the tools and the operational doctrine to make that calculation wrong. The firestorm is the answer to Russia's economic strategy. And right now, across the refineries and terminals and pipeline stations of a country that thought its energy wealth was untouchable, it is burning with an intensity that no amount of Russian air defense or emergency services or political threats can extinguish. It is worth understanding exactly how Ukraine got to this point, because the firestorm did not appear overnight. It is the product of a deliberate strategic evolution that began after Ukraine's 2023 counteroffensive stalled along the front line. When it became clear that Ukraine could not retake territory fast enough through conventional ground operations to change the war's trajectory, Ukrainian military planners began investing more seriously in a parallel strategy: attack Russia's capacity to sustain the war rather than attacking Russia's frontline troops directly. The front line was where Russia was strongest. Its interior, its refineries, its export terminals, its microelectronics plants, its aircraft repair facilities, was where it was most vulnerable. The early strikes were cautious, limited to roughly 500 kilometers from the Ukrainian border, focused on targets close enough that Ukraine's existing drone range could cover them. Russia adapted, moving some sensitive assets further away from the frontier. And then Ukraine adapted back, investing in longer-range drones with greater payload capacity, developing new platforms in partnership with European manufacturers, expanding its production base with European financing, and gradually extending the operational reach of its strike campaign deeper and deeper into Russian territory. By the time the FP-1 Firepoint drone entered service at scale, with its 1,500-kilometer range and 120-kilogram explosive payload, the rules of the campaign had changed permanently. The distance that Russia had relied upon as protection became irrelevant. Samara was now as exposed as Krasnodar. Leningrad Oblast was as reachable as the occupied territories in Ukraine's south. The entire geography of Russia's energy export infrastructure, designed in Soviet times when no adversary could strike it from Ukraine, suddenly fell within range of a weapon that cost a fraction of the targets it was destroying. The campaign also reveals something important about Ukraine's broader operational approach that distinguishes it from conventional military thinking. Instead of concentrating force for a single decisive blow, Ukraine applies continuous, distributed pressure across multiple target categories simultaneously. While the world's attention is on the burning refineries, Ukrainian drones are also hitting S-300 and S-400 air defense, batteries along the front line, opening the corridors that allow the deeper strikes to get through. While air defense systems are being degraded along the front, sea drones are disrupting Russian naval logistics in the Black Sea. While naval logistics are disrupted, the Donetsk supply network is being hunted by AI-enabled Hornet drones that Russia cannot jam. Every element of the campaign connects to every other element. The firestorm at the refineries is burning, partly because the air defense systems that should have stopped the drones approaching them have already been systematically dismantled further west. That is the architecture of what Ukraine has built. Not a single campaign. A system of simultaneous, mutually reinforcing campaigns that each weaken the infrastructure that supports the others. Russia's air defense weakness allows the deep strikes. The deep strikes reduce the oil revenue that funds air defense repair and replacement. Reduced air defense capacity makes the next round of deep strikes easier. The cycle runs in one direction, toward progressive Russian degradation, and Ukraine has built enough operational momentum in April 2026 that Russia cannot interrupt it through any single countermeasure. What comes next in this campaign will depend on whether Ukraine successfully integrates the heavier missile systems that analysts have been tracking. The FP-5 Flamingo, the Long Neptune, and indigenous ballistic systems represent a step change in destructive capacity. Compared to the FP-1 drones currently doing most of the refinery damage, a heavy missile strike on a refinery does not just start a fire. It destroys structural infrastructure that requires months or years to replace, not weeks. If Ukraine brings those systems into the energy campaign at scale in the coming months, the ability of Russian facilities to conduct patchwork repairs and return to operation will erode substantially. Russia will face not just temporary shutdowns, but permanent reductions in refining and export capacity that it cannot rebuild, while simultaneously spending at wartime rates on a front line that is consuming resources at catastrophic speed. The fires across Russia's oil infrastructure are not just fires. They are the visible surface of a strategic campaign that has been building for 2 years, is now operating at unprecedented scale and depth, and is specifically designed to reach the thing that Russia thought was safely behind its lines, the money that funds the war. Russia cannot put out this firestorm, not because its firefighters aren't working hard enough, but because the decision to start it was made in Kiev years ago, the weapons to sustain it were built through 4 years of wartime innovation, and the operational momentum driving it forward is now moving faster than any Russian countermeasure can catch. There is one more dimension to this story that deserves direct attention, because it has created an uncomfortable diplomatic moment for Ukraine's Western partners, as Ukraine's strikes on Russian energy infrastructure have intensified during the period when the Iran war has driven global oil prices sharply higher. Some of Ukraine's allies, including officials within the Trump administration, have privately urged Kyiv to pause the campaign. The logic is straightforward. Higher global oil prices hurt consumers everywhere, and Ukraine's strikes on Russian export infrastructure are contributing to reduced global oil supply at precisely the moment when the Strait of Hormuz crisis has already removed a significant portion of Middle Eastern production from global markets. Ukraine has not paused. Kirilo Budanov, the head of Ukraine's presidential office, acknowledged the Allied concern directly, but stated that strikes on Russian oil terminals are strengthening Ukraine's position in ongoing negotiations. That is a precise and deliberate framing. It is not just about destroying Russian revenue, it is about creating leverage. Every refinery that burns, every export terminal that goes offline, every pipeline station that catches fire is a data point in an ongoing negotiation about the terms on which this war might eventually end. Russia needs oil export revenue to sustain its military budget. Ukraine is destroying that revenue at scale. The cost of continuing the war, from Moscow's perspective, rises with every facility that goes offline. And that rising cost is exactly the pressure that negotiators on Ukraine's side need behind them when they sit across from Russian counterparts. The Trump administration renewed a temporary sanctions waiver on Russian oil in mid-April 2026, intended to stabilize global energy markets disrupted by the Iran war. Hours after that waiver was announced, Ukrainian drones struck the Novokuybyshevsk and Syzran refineries in Samara. Zelenskyy publicly criticized the waiver decision the same week. The message from Kiev was not subtle. Ukraine will not accept an arrangement in which Russia benefits from global energy price increases while simultaneously bombing Ukrainian cities. If the international system is going to allow Russia to profit from a crisis it helped create, Ukraine's response is to make that profit as difficult to realize as possible through direct action against the infrastructure that generates it. This is where the firestorm stands in late April 2026. Tuapse burning and rebuilding and burning again. Samara processing halted. Baltic terminals disrupted. Pipeline stations ablaze. Sevastopol oil depots struck. Russia's air defense forces stretched across a country too large to protect fully. Russia's firefighters working around the clock at fires that restart before they finish their shifts. Russia's finance ministry watching export revenue figures that keep declining precisely when it needs them most. And Ukraine's drone forces, operating from a country that Russia has been bombing every night for 4 years, finding more targets, flying further, hitting harder, and showing no sign of stopping. The firestorm that Ukraine unleashed is burning across Russia with an intensity and reach that the Kremlin never anticipated and has not found a way to extinguish. It will keep burning until Russia finds a reason to stop the war that started it